Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Book Boat with your co-host. I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm Alejandra. Can I just say it's always very confusing. Do we say host or co-host? Because technically we're both co-hosting, but I don't know, it's a very weird thing.
Well, I never like to say host first because I'm like, okay, well, I'm a co-host. So I don't never like to, I don't want people to think I'm in charge of it or you're in charge of it. So I just say co-host. I feel like that's easier for me, right?
Yeah, no, I like it.
Well, we hope that everyone has had an awesome week so far. And I know that for the teachers that are listening, you are probably a few weeks into your distance learning teaching. Mm-hmm. And let's just hear how you're doing, Alejandra.
It's good. I got my first Donors Choose funded, which was very exciting. I made little kits for my students that have chapter books that we're going to do. So I'm really excited to distribute those this week. We've also kind of gotten into a routine now that we're a few weeks in, which has been really nice. I don't hate distance learning, which I'm kind of surprised that I'm saying, but I also don't love it. And I think for me, the hardest part is knowing which of my students need that extra support, but it's very different compared to the classroom where, for example, they might be in a small group that I see multiple times a week. Whereas here it's hard because it's I have to plan when I can see them again to really help and support them. So that's been a big challenge for me in knowing who I need to help, but how do I actually do it? I think that's been my hardest part. But what about you? How are you doing?
I think I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same thing. I don't hate distant teaching. I think what I hate most about it is that my students are experiencing a lot of internet issues. Mm-hmm. And so then I'm cutting out, or for the past 2 weeks, every time probably half of my students go say something and all I hear is, Mm-hmm. Sorry for that noise, but it's but it's a real thing. And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, can you type it in the chat? Because I don't want to miss their question. Mm-hmm. And then before I know it, then I'm just kind of awkwardly sitting there for all my students to type in the chat. I'm in my lessons, there's a lot of awkward pauses. I'm okay, everyone type in the chat. And they're all yeah. So I think that's what I hate most about it. And I think that when I'm in person, students are able to see more of those connections that I'm trying to make. Yeah. One of our lessons was about inferences, and it's they were having a hard time finding making those connections about what an inference is over a distance. Mm-hmm. I tried everything in these activities, and so it's when they're in person, they can actually see those connections. I feel a little bit more. Yeah. Teaching is a very in-person job, so no, I don't hate distance teaching, but yes, it's a little challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also hard. At a staff meeting, we kind of talked about what are some things that we missed about in person. And I think one of the things I missed is just those small moments where you're in the class together. I mean, you're with these students 8 hours a day, every day for 5 days a week. You end up becoming a family, and there's always these little I don't know, quirky random moments where the bonding happens. And it's a lot harder over Zoom because I only have such a limited time with them that I definitely feel I'm always kind of all right, academics, that there's not a lot of time to socialize. And I've definitely kind of stopped. And I've started to do little fun activities where they write in their journal. We did a fun one where they had to rate their least favorite food. And they had to, so then I would go and I would I don't know, I'd be okay, this person does not like mushrooms on pizza. And I want you guys to guess who it is. Just taking 5 minutes to do a little activity like that. And they look they just really look forward to it. And it's a lot of fun. And it kind of helps bring back those more personal moments, I think.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I needed to start doing more activities. I feel because I'm only the ELA teacher, it's just such a focus on ELA. Yeah. And everything is very structured right now, which I mean, I understand why, but at the same time, it's I want to do fun activities with my students.
And it's just hard because it's you want to just make sure that they're getting the academic stuff, but I need it and they need those connections as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So let's go ahead and transition into our topic, which is a very, very exciting topic. And before we even picked this topic, we already had a book in mind, which is the book that I'm going to talk about first. And this book could have not come at a better time in our hearts, in our nation. So the topic is elections and politics,
yes.
Especially at a time where there is such a political divide in our world of one way or another. And I think that we want to really teach our students of like doing your research, making sure you know everything, like showing them like positive things about politics, especially because everything gets misconstrued with social media and anything. So I just want to see, like, we wanted to introduce politics in our classrooms in a very interesting way. And I'm actually planning on reading this book. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. The first book we picked, which is very special to us, is I Dissent by Debbie Levy. And we picked this book because this book is just, it's inspirational, it's amazing, and who doesn't love RBG? And so we picked it, and then she sadly passed away. And I think it's been kind of like a mourning loss in a sense of like for our nation, because she was the ultimate leader for social justice, for gender equality, for a lot of the rights that we have now. And so I love reading this book. And I remember the first time I read this book, it was when I was student teaching, and my mentor teacher was like, oh, I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like, you have to read this to the kids. And she because I was like going through a library, like, oh, what book am I going to read today for story time? She handed it to me. She's like, I love this book. And as I was reading it, and then there's like very special moments when I read the book to my kids, like I'm also like, oh, as I'm turning the next page.
Yeah.
So this was the book that definitely did that for me. I was reading it and like I wanted to read faster so that I can turn the page and just like get to the next one to find out more and more about her just like exciting life, how she was like the one person in like this class of 200 people at her Harvard law school, and like everything she went through, and how she literally fought for just so many rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like reading that, and I was like telling my students like, yeah, there's good people in politics. Like, don't let social media or like news media or anything like misconstrue your like view of like how politics should be run. Like she's a role model. And so I just really love reading this book, and I am going to plan reading this book on right before the election, so that my students have like, I like to call it fun reading Fridays. And we always like read fun books, and we do like journal entries and stuff about like what this book means, like so it's very exciting. And I love this book. So who writes the story? Well, Debbie Levy, and she has won awards, several of them. She's written books about civil rights dramas. She's written stories about, she's written quite a few books about like all these interesting topics. And so she is writing good books for children to follow. What else? What's our next question? Who benefits from the story? Everybody. I think knowing about politics, especially in this country, is something that everybody benefits. Like, we are teaching students to vote for change, to get out there, and their voice does matter as long as we all like stick together and like we have something that we're very passionate about. So I think everybody benefits from the story. And who is missing from the story? I think that nothing is missing from the stories, but I do think something is going to be missing from all of our stories.
Yeah, which we're going to talk about, right, at the end?
Yes, we're going to talk about at the end. But nothing from this story, I think it does a really good job at like mentioning almost like snapshots of like RBG's life, and just like kind of like giving us a sense of who she was, all like the law cases, all the court cases, I mean, that she dissented on, and like that powerful I dissent. How it just changed so much for us. So yeah, that is the book I'm presenting.
Yeah, and we were just talking about how, I mean, the timing is crazy. She, when we are recording this, I think she passed away like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks, which is crazy. Like, I feel like it's going to be one of those moments where I like look back and I knew exactly what I was doing. I was oddly standing at Target, of course. And then I got the notification. I texted my friends right away, like, RBG passed away. Like, and it was just this moment of, I don't know, I feel awful for her at the same time, because she obviously had been ill for so long, and it just seemed like she was holding out for our country to have a new president, so they could then pick who the Supreme Court nominee would be. But I actually watched the RBG documentary, which I think would be really cool to like compare kind of with the book. That'd be a fun activity.
Yeah.
Which also, I didn't realize how big of an RBG fan you were. The phenomenal brand that I love has RBG like leggings, which they sound very weird, but the way they, I don't know, it's very cool. I'm gonna have to send you the link after. And they have like it's a one piece, and they have like a t-shirt where RBG looks kind of like up, like done up in a way. It's interesting. I'm gonna have to share the link with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, yeah, like RBG, I don't know, like I'm definitely gonna have to teach my students about her, like just the door she opened, especially for women. Like I was not aware, like before her, I mean, we weren't even allowed to like have a credit card without having like a male co-signer or signer with us, or being able to own property. Like it's wild. And you know, I'm, as a female, I'm super thankful that she stood up for females everywhere. And I'm sure it wasn't easy when there was like the whole bench was always males. Like it was a majority, it was always on males. It was either two females or one female. So for her to stand up and voice these things, I think took a lot of courage.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah.
I'm really glad that this book was picked, and that this is a book that we're sharing, which kind of then brings me to my book. I picked Grace for President, and if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see I have the book. I love this book. I love Grace. She's a great character. And it's written by Kelly DiPuccio. I don't know. This is a hard name for me to say, so I'm very sorry, because we definitely did a whole names episode. So I look up a little bit about the author. She's born in Michigan, and she went to Michigan State University, where she studied child psychology and child development, which I actually studied child development, so I thought that was pretty cool. The illustrator is Lei Yun Pham, and she was born in Vietnam, and she went to school at the University of California, Los Angeles. And I believe she's actually now in San Francisco, which is kind of exciting because we are from the Bay Area, and so she's in the Bay Area. And they both, of course, are award-winning, best-selling author, illustrator, which I think is amazing. So the book is about a little girl named Grace, and the class, they're kind of learning about presidents and election, and I'll open up the book so you guys can see, but they put up a picture of all of our presidents, and of course Grace notices that there are no girls that have been president, and this is shocking to her, as it should be shocking to everybody that we have not had a female president. So Grace, you know, takes charge, and she says, I am going to be president then, which I love. You know, she is, I believe, in second grade in the book. She doesn't care how old she is. She just knows that we need a female president, and she decides she's going to do it. So I really love how the teacher in the book then kind of turns this into an activity where they're like, okay, we're going to have our own class election, and they invite another second grade class, who then has another student who is a boy running against Grace. And I really liked this book because it really talks about the election process, which can be very confusing, and even confusing for adults many times. But it talks about like the electoral votes, and how each state has like a different amount of votes, which I think can also be confusing. And as an adult, I probably would definitely want to do more research so I can make sure I can explain it to my students in a way that they understand. But I think it's really cool because it shows like the two students who are running against each other then make like campaigns, like posters and slogans, and they kind of have their own like debates and rallies, which is really cool because I mean that's what happens in a real election.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool because then you'll see like in the book, like she'll have like vote for Grace, like she'll have cupcakes, she has classmates, you know, they go and they meet with like the soccer players, they go and they talk with different clubs. So it's really cool. And then at the end of the book, I really liked it because in the author's notes, she kind of talks about how, for example, California will get 55 electoral votes because of our 2 senators and then our 53 representatives. So I just think it's really interesting that they took the time to kind of write that information out for us. And there is actually a second book, Grace Goes to Washington, which I really want to get. But I love this book, and I didn't mention it, but Grace, the character, if you're listening to us and not watching the video, Grace is actually a little girl who is Black, and I love the fact that in the book they never pointed it out really, which I think was kind of great because I don't know, like I'm someone who, for example, if like there's a book, it doesn't always have to be like, okay, this is about Martin Luther King, or if it was about a Latino person, it's not Cesar Chavez, like it's just them being like, you know, it's this little girl being like, I'm gonna run for president, and no matter her race or her age or if she's a girl, like she's just like, I'm gonna go and do it. And I loved that about this book. And then, so who writes the story? So I mentioned the 2 authors and illustrator. I was kind of surprised that the author, I mean, from what it appears, I believe she's white. I think I automatically assumed because of the cover, it was going to be somebody who was Black. Which then I was thinking, and I don't know, like I kind of was going back and forth because, I mean, we've definitely made the point of we want to look at who are writing these books because we want the stories to be very authentic and true to what they are. But at the same time, I said, you know, like Grace, like they never pointed out her race in the book. Yeah. So did it need to be written by somebody who was Black because our main character is Black, you know? But again, it wasn't talking about her race specifically. Like it was somebody, like, should this book be written by somebody who's very into politics then? Like, because it's a book about kind of politics, where I think this is where things get trickier because I think it's a great book. Would it be cool if it was written by somebody who is Black? I think, yeah, it would be, because then my students might be able to see themselves in it. But of course, I have students who are white who might also want to be authors. So I think this is where things get a little tricky because, I mean, overall, it's a great book and I'm thankful for it. But I think it was just an interesting thing that I kind of noticed.
Yeah. No, and that is a good question to ask because it's like, it's almost that tricky situation of what you don't want to step on toes, but at the same time, it's like, is it okay? Is it not okay?
Yeah.
So it is that tricky situation. I want to go back to something you said, and I wrote myself a little bit of a note here.
Okay.
That book, how it explained the Electoral College.
Yeah.
I think that is super important because when it comes down to the election, I think that that's the one question that a lot of younger kids have. It's like, what is this Electoral College? Like, how are they making the votes and all this? And so that is very good that they explain it because that is like a big, big part of it. So I really love that that book explains it for them and it puts it down and you said, and it makes it all so that kids can understand. Because I think like sometimes when we do pick political books, like it could just go way over their heads.
Yeah.
And before you know it, it's just
there.
Yeah.
But even how like the teacher in the book, she made it into a class activity, I think was really cool. And I think if I were in person teaching, I think this would be a really fun activity. Yeah. We're not necessarily like I have 2 students running against each other, but I don't know, maybe like 2 stuffed characters that we have or something like that. But I think it's important because a lot of the times people might feel like their vote is like doesn't count or doesn't matter, and that's like a reason why they don't want to vote. So I think explaining the process can be really helpful. And of course, I mean, our students are way too young to vote, but I think just getting them like familiar and comfortable with these types of conversations is important.
Yes. Okay. So that was our second book.
Yeah.
Now this third book. So usually have we done 3 books in a?
I think we have in the past, but it's not common. It's
not
we always do.
We just both really like this book.
Yeah.
And it's actually part of a series of books who like they're all different, but the message behind them is just incredible. So this one is Sophia Valdez, Future Prez, First of all, love it that it's future prez.
Yeah.
Everything about this book. So the illustrations by it. So it was written by Andrea Beatty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading my little notes on my laptop, everyone. Hence the glasses. I honestly need blue light glasses at this point. Yes. So it's written by Andrea Beatty, and who was it illustrated by? Do we know?
David Roberts.
David Robert, yes.
And I'm kind of flipping through the book now in case you're watching our video. Like you're saying, yeah, the illustrations are beautiful.
So if you're listening and you're familiar with the series, every single one of these books has kids in just these like amazing roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's like when a lot of books are written, and this goes also back to with your book, The Gray Star President, is that when kids see themselves in books, they're almost like in like, they don't see, or I guess the way I'm trying to say this is that I feel like not a lot of books, kids are portrayed in like these awesome like roles. Like there's one in the series of books of Sofia Valdez for President. In that series of books, there's like engineers, there's scientists, and so it's like architect, and so it's like for kids to see themselves in those roles, I think is just very crucial, because then they kind of can start like thinking and manifesting goals of like, hey, how can I get there?
Yeah.
So I love this book. I think it's adorable. The message behind it is just so cute.
Yeah. Can I give a quick summary? Yeah. Sorry, I like read it right before.
Go for it.
So it's about Sofia and her grandpa. I think she calls him her abuelo, because I think she's a Spanish speaker. Yeah, so she calls him her abuelo, grandpa. And they are kind of just like living their life, running errands, and she kind of sees a problem. This book kind of reminds me of Kamala and Maya's Big Adventure in this way, where our character sees a problem. She comes up with a solution, and she goes to try to find like an answer for it. And at first they kind of like shut her down, like, oh, you're too young. But she goes back and she's like, no, like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Like, this is something that needs to be taken care of. And she decides she's going to do it. So I guess I'll kind of spoil it a little, as in like, she wants to build a park pretty much. So she decides to go, and she gets her neighborhood community, like children and other adults, to kind of like, I don't know, do like a little protest or march, and they are signing petitions and they're getting it started. And I just love it because, again, it's like this little girl who I'm going to assume is Latina. Like in the book, they use words in Spanish. And just the fact that she goes and she just takes charge. Like, I just love that. And I love the way that, I don't know, like it just shows that you can't be too little to like try to help or solve a problem.
Yeah, yes, love that. And I wrote myself a little note that says kids taking action, or children taking action. And I love books like that. It reminds me of the book you mentioned a couple episodes again. You know which one I'm talking about. It's your favorite book.
Yeah, the Kamala and Maya book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kamala and Maya, like how about they took the action to make change possible. And so I think it's already telling kids like, you do have a voice, you do have power, and you can make change happen. So I love that book. So let's go through our questions then.
Yeah.
Who writes the stories?
So I looked up a little bit about our author. She was raised in Southern Illinois, and she went to Illinois University, where she actually studied biology and computer science, which I think is kind of interesting because most of our authors have usually been around like kids and like child psychology. Which is, I think, maybe what might have inspired her to write these books about being like an engineer, a scientist, or an architect. I found it interesting. I don't know if this is totally accurate, but I looked up the illustrator, and it says that he would make women's hats, or like made them, like actually physically, and he also illustrated a lot of children's books. But I found that to be kind of a fun fact. But yeah, okay, so who benefits from the stories, I think this kind of ties, and this kind of ties into our who's missing in a way, which I love that these stories, they were all very like female driven. All of our characters were females, women, little girls, which we were kind of talking about before, and I found it very funny because typically when you look in politics, it's run by, this is, hopefully I don't get hate, but typically politics is run by older white men. So it was funny that none of our books...
There's more diversity happening now.
Yeah, which is awesome, and I love that, and I love that it is more diverse, and our children are going to see this.
Yeah, so going on that is who's missing from the stories, who benefits from the stories, everyone. Who's missing, like you said, it's usually what we tend to see is like the typical white male politician. But one thing that I was really thinking is to include, so that there is a male figure in this, is we could include other politicians such as Harvey Milk. Like thinking back.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, thinking about that book that we Pride and the story of the rainbow flag, or the story of Harvey Milk. That would be a great way to bring in like a male politician that's not always like fitting the stereotypical like white male who only votes this way type of role.
And I think, now that I'm thinking, it would have been really cool, which I don't think we're gonna have enough time, but I'm gonna say the books here, so in case, because I think this episode is supposed to go out like the week before election. I think it's really cool that on our Democratic presidential nominee and vice presidential nominee, they both have children's books out. Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden, actually wrote a book about Joe Biden when he was younger, which I think is really cool. And of course, Kamala Harris, her niece, Mina Harris, wrote Kamala and Maya's Big Adventure. So I think it would be really cool to introduce our nominees like to children with these books, because it's a lot fun. It's a lot more fun than just reading like a news article. And they don't always know who they are. So I think it'd be really cool for teachers or parents to read those two books to them, and then they kind of have an idea of our nominee.
And I think also with that, I think it would be a really good time to also like have books about like fighting for rights, or because I feel like everybody will, like when they do civil rights movement, it's always on like Black History Month. And it's something that could be celebrated and recognized all year long. So I think this would be a very good time to like bring in books like that and be like, okay, this is why we vote. This is why we have politicians, because we vote for them to make change, to make things happen. Like we rally, we protest, we vote these people in so that things like this can get changed. So I think it would be really good to include some books like that.
I think it would also be really important to talk about how, obviously this is a big year because it's a presidential race and we're voting for our next president, but I think it's also important to talk about like voting for mayor and for governor, because these are the people who are making like direct impacts in our communities. Like, obviously the president is a huge important role, but I think a lot of the times we kind of overlook this, where these are the people who are directly impacting our community and kind of making those choices for us. So I think just getting the word out to vote is really important. I want to shamelessly plug my shirt. I'm really excited about it because I got it. And it's this girl who says vote. Well, it says vota, which is in Spanish. So I think it's really cool. And she is a Latina-owned business. I think the company is Genziano. It's on Instagram. They have really great shirts, and they came out with like a voting merch shirt. So I think it's really important to just, I don't know, I think so. It's really hard because beforehand I was very like, especially as a teacher, I didn't always want to like share this type of thing. But I think we're, like you were saying at the beginning of this episode, this election it's just become so divided, you know, like you're either one way or you're the other way. And it's hard now. It's just like thinking about it for so long. Because it's always like that taboo subject, you know, like it's always one of those things like you don't really talk about, but we've become so divided. And I think, I don't know, as a teacher who has all Latino students, I can't not say anything. And I have to like, I don't know, like I've just become much more open about it. I don't know where I'm going, but.
Well, no, education is highly politicized. So you have to be open about it. You have to talk about it with students. If you even think about like where the Common Core standards come from, like who's backing them up, like education is highly politicized.
And can I say, I did not, I think you were, I don't remember if we had this class together. Okay, very off topic, but I did not know that our history books are vary very differently from state to state, and how a lot of the politics and politicians actually can dictate like what is going in these textbooks, and like how very different a textbook from California compared to Texas could be, and like what they include and what they don't include is very surprising. So please make sure you're like looking into these things, teachers. I didn't know.
Absolutely. And speaking, since your shirt said vote, I think my last point for this podcast is 100 years ago, women were able to vote. Like, we got our right to vote. 100 years exactly. Well, actually, it was on August 18th. But I think this is a very good year for us to like remember that and like see how far we've come and see where we still need to be.
So like I said, I think this episode's coming up the week before election, so if you haven't voted, please vote. Like, go out there and just vote. It's not going to hurt you, so go out and do it.
Yes. Okay, so I think that's going to be all for us today, and as always, we like to do our ending question and our ending challenge. So Alejandra, take it away with our ending question.
So our question is, what are some election activities you want to do with your class? And I'd also like to know if you are not going to do any, like kind of maybe what was your reasoning behind it? I'm always very curious. Like, I'd love to just hear why why we're doing this or why you're not doing this.
Yes. And exactly. Like, do you have mock elections in your class? And you bring in like both viewpoints of both presidents and or presidential nominees in your classroom? Like, what are some things that you do so that students are aware of like what is going on? And then our ending challenge for you is, once you're done listening to this podcast, post a picture of you reading and tag us. We want to see what you're currently reading. Do you like to go to a park and read? Are you more of a like read with your blanket type of person? Like, we want to see that. Like, what type of reader are you? Like, where do you go in your little like book escape? So
wait, can I add like a side note challenge? I just realized that this is coming out again like a week before election. So you'll hear this, but hopefully I'll remind you guys, but I want you to show off your little I voted sticker, because I think it's really cool, and I want to see all of the teachers and parents on our feed sending us your I voted sticker with maybe your favorite election book or book about politics.
Yes, exactly. So I like that. Post a picture of your book and your I vote sticker. Love that. Okay, so.
All right. So this is the end. Oh man, that went by quick. So please subscribe to our podcast. We should be on all major podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify. Give us a rating if you enjoyed this. Of course, 5 stars would be great. Leave us a review. I got tongue tied. Leave us a review. Let us know what you liked or what we could improve on. Follow our YouTube channel, which I believe if you just search up The Book Boat, and it's also linked in our episode notes. And follow our Instagram at _bookboat, where we post all of our like ending questions and challenges, and where you can tag us, and give us a big old like on Facebook at The Book Boat.
Yes, thank you. We will see you next time. Enjoy your week, and we hope that you go out and vote. Well, actually, you better go out and vote. It's not we hope, you better.
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn, for another great episode. So yeah, go vote, everybody.
Bye, everyone.